felt like. I was just overwhelmed with this presence that was just shooting throughout my entire body.
I find it interesting that you said you were trying to like resist, because I feel like I've done that myself. As if I already didn't feel so alone already, because everybody around me was not a believer.
It's not because I was lesser than, and it doesn't make me more spiritual. It's just somehow God knew that that's what I needed in that moment. I knew I had a gift of communication, right? So but I didn't know exactly what that would look like.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Thank you so much for joining. Welcome back to Beyond the Cut. This is episode 6, and this is my family friend. This is Pastor Clint Hatton. Would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
That's right. My name is Clint Hatton. Yeah, I like to have a little fun too, Jonathan. No, my name is Clint Hatton. Super excited to be with Jonathan today. You know, one of the things that I love about coming on a podcast like this, because I've had the opportunity to do some, is when you got someone like Jonathan who's, and I'm going to brag on him for a second. He didn't know I was going to do this, I'm sure, but super smart, very thoughtful. And the fact that he loves to bring on different people with, you know, just different thoughts, maybe sometimes conflicting thoughts. And he's a curious person. And so that's one of and I am too. So that's one of the reasons why I'm glad to be with you today. So let's roll.
Yeah. So, I guess to start, you know, what kind of wanted you, or what introduced you to the idea of getting into ministry? And, I guess, where was your origin of faith?
Yeah. Okay. Well, so that's a long story that I will try to make more concise. Because I did not grow up in church. So for me, it wasn't one of those things where I was growing up in church. And, you know, from a very young age, I was about 11 or 12 when my parents, who had been married for like 25 years at that point, my dad had cheated on my mom. He moved in with his girlfriend there was about a 2-year period of time. I grew up in Southern California. And at one point they got back together and moved us to out in the middle of absolutely nowhere, Montana. In southern Montana. And then 3 months later, my dad jumped on a plane and left us there. And then we ended up moving back to Southern California. And after that, they eventually reconciled. And so, as you can hear, a little bit of a train wreck when I was around, 11, 12, 13 years old. And so we had no church background. I wasn't raised in it. And as you can hear, just a lot of just turmoil and trauma. So by the time I was 12, 13, I started to experiment with alcohol and drugs, and that would continue. I was an athlete, so it was one thing that kept me. All right, Jonathan, this is how I remember it. It's the one thing that kept me from completely going over the edge, right? Because I wanted to compete. Now, I still abused alcohol and drugs pretty heavily, so I don't want to downplay that. But I always made sure that, I was straight enough to be able to compete and do the things that I needed to do, work out, whatever. Anyway, long story short with all that stuff is eventually that led to me in my 20s getting into the car business after my football and baseball careers were over, and got even heavier into drugs. Pretty much if it didn't involve a needle, I was willing to try it or do it, and did for a very long time. I had about a 9-year stretch from the time I was approximately 21 until about 30, where I also, abused meth pretty heavy. And so that said, spiritual life, church life, faith, none of that was ever a part of it. But ultimately what happened was I ended up getting involved in a network marketing nutritional company. And what happened through that was the person who was my upline, if, for those of your listeners out there that I'm sure or at least familiar in some way with network marketing, with the multi-levels. My upline was a believer. She was a Christian, and a pretty strong one. And she was also very successful, like on the cover of Success magazine kind of successful. So that meant something to me, right? That caught my attention. And over the course of several months of her mentoring me, she would ask me, "Hey, do you own a Bible?" I'm like, "Yeah, I own a Bible." And she'd take me to scriptures and read something to me. And, it was just the thing she did until one day I decided to visit the church they went to. And my life was pretty radically changed. We can get into that experience if you want. I had a pretty radical first day at church, to say the least. But I gave my life to the Lord at 31 years old. And that's really, for me, what began to turn the trajectory of my life completely in the opposite direction of where I was going.
Yeah, we can definitely go into that first time going into service, because I think people need to hear that.
Okay. Well, so again, you got to keep it. For those of you who did grow up in church, you need to remember I had no frame of reference. So I'm in this church in Northern California. It was a pretty good sized church. If I had to guess, I mean, this has been almost 30 years ago now, but there was probably 800 to 1,000 people in that particular church service. And, I'm just there because I like to say it this way, Jonathan. The only reason I accepted the invitation is because I knew there was something else. There was this like X factor about the way my upline's name was Kimber, and she was married to a guy named John, and they were both in this business and believers. And I knew there was like this X factor about them. So that's why I finally decided to go. I'm like, all right, I'm going to see what this church thing is. And what ended up happening is they had this worship portion, and then there's music and singing for those of you who may not have stepped into a church like that. So they were singing, a lot of dancing. There was people with tambourines. It was pretty wild for someone who had no church reference. But then at one point, the pastor, he started speaking to the hearts of people. This is before he even spoke any kind of a message. And somewhere in the midst of that, I really felt, and compelled is really still to this day the best way to describe it. I felt spiritually, I felt emotionally, and I literally felt even physically compelled to go forward. I literally felt like I was being pulled forward. It was super weird. I even tried to fight it for a little bit. I was like kind of bending my knees, and because I literally kept like kind of getting pulled forward, like there was a string, like on your shirt or something, and somebody was pulling and taking you off balance. And so I kept getting my balance back. And then finally, there was just something about the invitation that he gave that I'm like, and it was to give my life to Jesus. I'm like, okay, I've got to do that. So no harm, no foul, no big deal. I'm walking up to the front, not really expecting much of anything other than I have no idea what's going on. And we get to the front, and, anybody who's been in, you don't have to have been in a church. You could have been to a concert or anything else. You've got the seating, and then you got the stage, right? So I get up to the stage, and back in those days, this particular church had this roll-away portable wall. And so they rolled it up to the edge of the stage, and it was, I don't know, probably 6-8 feet tall. And the idea was, they said, hey, we're going to have somebody pray with you while we continue service. So, and I wasn't the only one. There was a couple other people that day too. So we go around the other side of this false wall, and meanwhile, service just goes on. And moments later, this guy's, his name was Lance. I still remember him to this day. And he was, he just happened to be the youth pastor. He was this skinny dude. And the only reason why that's relevant is because at one point he put his hand on my chest. Now, I don't know if your listeners, again, whether they're believers or not believers, if they've ever seen anything like this, but I had watched like TBN or different Christian shows before, mostly honestly to make fun of. And when I watch them, sometimes you would see somebody getting knocked over or fall on the ground or whatever. And so this guy's shoving on my chest. And I'm thinking, this dude's trying to do that, whatever that is. Yeah. And I just kind of dug in. I didn't say a word, but I just kind of stared him in my eyes and in my head. I was just saying, dude, you are not pushing me over. And so I just kind of locked in, and I could feel he was still trying to push me, and nothing's happening. I don't sense anything supernatural happening at all. Mm-hmm. And then I heard a voice, and it wasn't a voice, just so everybody's clear. It was very loud. I'm not saying it was like it was coming from outside of me, but I heard this voice very clearly say, let him. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what anybody's first thought is when I say that. But if you go into a church today, or if you go into a lot of auditoriums, not much has changed with the flooring. And what I mean by that is you've got about a quarter of an inch, maybe, of some sort of foam or cushioning, and then you have a very thin layer of carpet. It's hard as a rock. And I was thinking, that didn't seem like a very good idea, right? Letting this guy push me over. But there was something that was super compelling. And so ultimately what happened was I let this guy push me over. I fell to the ground with his force, but completely allowing it to happen.
Yeah.
And when I hit the ground, something happened that 30 years later, I still have a real challenge trying to describe for anybody that hasn't had this kind of a supernatural encounter. But what happened was right in the middle of my chest, I felt just and today I have language for it. So, everyone, please forgive me. I'm going to use some language here that I'm familiar with that I wasn't at the time, but I just felt the power of God, the presence of God just hit me in the chest. And then it shot through my entire body. And all I can really describe is my body. It was so, gosh, I even hate to use this word. Euphoric is the only way I can explain it. I felt so good. And remember, this is somebody who did a lot of drugs. So you can take any drug that I ever did and amplify that times a million. And that's what it felt like. I was just overwhelmed with this presence that was just shooting throughout my entire body. And where it got crazy, and then I'm going to bounce it back to you here in just a second, but where it got crazy for me is it seemed like just, a moment. Like I had my eyes closed when I hit the ground, but it seemed like it had only been like, I don't know, a minute or something. I mean, just didn't seem like any time that went by at all. Mm-hmm. And when I opened my eyes, I still felt pressure on my chest. So I was expecting to see this Lance dude, like pounced on me, pushing his hand down on me. Right. And I opened my eyes and there was nobody there. And then I looked around and I'm still on the other side of this false wall I told you guys about a minute ago. And at that point, I had been out for 45 minutes. The entire message, the rest of the church service, all of it was over. The band was packing out. And really, other than the band and a few volunteers, the only people left in the auditorium were my friends who brought me. And at that time, I was previously married. My ex-wife was there too. And it was her first time ever going as well. So that was my initial launch into a relationship with God. And I'll end it with this thought, and then I'm going to bounce it back to you for wherever you want to go with this. But the best way to describe what was happening is I felt this just incredible, overwhelming sense of love. And I felt like a son with a father. And that's the best description I can give it, after 30 years of telling this story and trying to figure out a different way to say
it. That's beautiful, because I feel like everybody has a different testimony and a different testament as to what the Lord has done in each of their lives. Because I don't think any two people have the same story. I've had the opportunity of meeting a lot of new people, especially as I've joined college ministry, and to hear how everybody can really, like, almost everybody that I met has grown up in the church, but I feel like no two people have had the same experience. Everybody has a completely different testimony as to how the Lord worked in each of their lives and made himself known to each of them. And I just found that so unique, because I'm just like, I grew up in the church and I guess I never really understood the power of people's testimonies, but at least once a month through this ministry during our large groups, we take a time where at least 2 or 3 people come up and share their testimonies. It's very eye-opening, because it's just like, man, like, we can all say that we grew up in the church, but that's the beautiful part about Jesus, is that he doesn't really use the same method twice. And it's really cool to see how we can really have like the same upbringing, the same friend group, go to the same school, literally do the same thing, and yet God uses our lives and the way that we live, the people that we surround ourselves with, to really shape who we are. And it, in one instance, he can change everything.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I totally agree.
I find it interesting that you said you were trying to like resist, because I feel like I've done that myself, of at least throughout my life within 20 years of feeling like even when I got baptized, I think this is
Mm.
the first time I ever experienced this. I never really understood it, and I feel like I've been understanding it more. But when I got baptized, um, I forgot his name. Um, when he baptized me, he said that I was almost like resisting going under the water and then came up. And so at 13 years old, I didn't understand what that meant. And then honestly, like I had gone through the rest of high school incredibly depressed,
Mm.
like just angry. Like I didn't understand anything. I was still angry at God for the way that He made me physically. I didn't understand, like I didn't have a testimony at that point. I just knew that God had saved me, and that He was there. I just wasn't taking advantage of the Bible, even though it was sitting on my desk. Like I'd never opened it. I mean, I would go to school once a week as a co-op, and I just, I worked at a fast food place for a year in my senior year of high school, and I became just like so incredibly depressed and alone,
Mm.
because he would state my GM would state me in in a drive-through. When it gets busy, you have two windows. The first window is typically to take payments. Second window is where they give you your food and your drink, and you're off, whatever. He would stick me in the first window. They call that the hole. And anytime it would get busy, he would just say, just go to the hole, take payments. That's what I would do. I would take payments and make kids' bags for kids' meals. And I would be there for essentially like a 5-hour shift, Monday through Friday. And it was terrible. I'm just like, as if I already didn't feel so alone already, because everybody around me was not a believer. They
Mm.
claimed that they were, they claimed to be going to church. They were not acting like it at all. I mean, it was just, I felt like I was alone, because I'm just like, why is everybody talking like they are, but they're not acting like it? Like I
Mm.
always grew up in a place where we're taught the word of God, and you need to act right. And so I just never understood that. And then in my freshman year of college, really after I kind of had to say goodbye to like the only friends that I ever knew for probably about a decade, because I didn't make friends at church. Me being a socially awkward middle school kid, I didn't have friends. I mean, I used to wear an like a orthotic on my left leg. I mean, I used to feel like a freak around everybody else, and I knew that. I mean, now knowing the difference, I feel like people may have been a little bit more accepting. I don't really know, but I definitely didn't feel like it back then,
Mm.
and I hated it. I felt so alone, and it wasn't until my freshman year that I met my small group leader at the time, who was in charge of the ministry. Was called Focus, and so um, we had my older sister's old high school friends. They had gone to my same community college, and they told my mom about it. And so I went and tried it out. I was just like, I don't really know. We'll see. Then I met him, and then we started doing this thing called FOJ, Focus on Jesus. It was like a one-on-one time where we would go through this workbook and just dissect different aspects of our lives and go into scripture. I brought my Bible, and we would just read and talk. That was the first time I'd ever experienced something like that in my entire life.
Mm.
And then after that, he just like completely opened my eyes. to something like there was so much more depth to scripture than I had ever thought. And in ways that like youth services never taught me. Because I feel like with youth, they have to keep it shallow enough for people that have never stepped into a church, but still give it some level of depth. I never experienced that depth. And so to know that there was like so much richness in the word, and I had no idea that it was there, was just super eye-opening. And then afterwards, I look back at my freshman year and I'm like, I feel like I literally like accomplished nothing. I took 10 classes over the span of a year, and I just look back on it and I'm just like, what the heck did I do for 32 weeks? Like I didn't do anything. Like I felt no closer to accomplishing any of my goals, especially career-wise. I'm just like, I am nowhere near where I'm supposed to be. But I think what the difference was, I made it a point to tell myself, okay, fine. Like I mean, I was never in sports. I never really had those like motivational coaches who'd be like, okay, you messed up here. This is how you can improve. I never had that. So for me, I was just like, okay, I messed up here. I obviously did not accomplish anything. How can I kind of pivot for my sophomore year? And in my sophomore year, I really like made it a point and I challenged myself to read the entire Bible cover to cover for the very first time. And I was just like, let me try to be realistic with this and span it across 32 weeks. Before my junior year, I finished it for the very first time. And that was also along the same time that I started going to, that I started going to a Bible study through family friends who were at the church that we were at the time. And being with other people that were so theologically sound, I'm a competitive person. I felt incredibly behind, and I've hated feeling behind. You can ask any of my old high school friends. I was the type of person that went the extra mile for no reason at all. I would be annotating books that all my friends would be like, why would you do that? We did the bare minimum. We just read the book. My book was so annotated, and I hated it. I just did it because I thought that's what the bare minimum was. And so after doing that, I realized that there was just so much richness in the Bible, and yet it was here the entire time, and I didn't take advantage of it for 18 or 19 years of my life. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like this was here the whole time, and I had no idea. And so because of that, and because I was surrounded by a lot of godly men who were actively in their word, and I think the beautiful part of that Bible study was that we would meet every single Monday, and we would essentially be meeting for probably about 3 to 4 hours every single Monday evening, and we could spend that entire time on pretty much one verse. I had never experienced that in my entire life, and I'm like, this is crazy. The first time I went, I'm just like, we're not reading a whole chapter, we're reading one verse. It was insane. And to see how pretty much people are flipping through Old Testament, New Testament, and being like, this correlates to this, that correlates to that. I'm like, it's all interconnected, and I had no idea. So what you said is incredibly amazing, because I think the testimonies that people have are so beautiful, because I think it just goes into how personal our God is, and how he doesn't use the same method twice. And even if he does, he tweaks it with every person, because he knows the hearts of his children. And I just think it's just so beautiful. So
I love that. Yeah, one of my favorite scriptures is Revelation 19:10, which says the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. And the implication of that verse is that he will do it again. But to your point, he does it again. and again and again and again and again, but it doesn't look the same. The result's the same. He draws us into relationship. The result's the same. We are, given that opportunity to receive salvation and live a life for him and all the benefits that come with that. But my wife, who obviously, Amaryllis, same thing. She has a very different testimony. She was in church for many, many years. I think she started when she was like 10 or something like that. She's almost 50 now. Shh, don't cut that part out of this part. Yeah, don't get me in trouble. Yeah, she's 20. Sorry, I meant to say 20. But anyway, to your exact point, she has had a different journey, the way that the Lord and her have developed their relationship. And she's never had a physical interaction with the presence of God the way I did. And I can't duplicate it either, right?
Right.
I only had it one time. I think that's really important for people to know is, and that experience it's not because I was lesser than, and it doesn't make me more spiritual. It's just somehow God knew that that's what I needed in that moment. And I think, it's a dangerous thing to put yourself into thinking exactly what God was doing. So I'm just going to say, I think part of what he was doing with me was just he knew I needed a really tangible experience that no matter what would come against me, because I didn't really have a biblical foundation when this happened at all. I mean, I was 30 minutes into attending a church service, but I think he knew that no matter what would happen after that, there was no way that I could deny that experience, especially because, as you reminded the audience a minute ago, I wasn't looking for it. And I was even resisting it. And then, but there's a super key piece in this though. And it's not to have the kind of experience I had. It's what's necessary to have an experience with God. I had to give in and say, okay. And when the minute I gave in and said, okay, and let him do what he wanted to do, it was game on.
Yeah. Yeah. There's nothing quite like an undeniable experience that you can't explain you really can't explain to anybody else. It was just that one moment that you had between you and God.
Yeah.
That you had to have in order to really be like, okay, I mean, this is it. There's no turning back, and there's nothing I can do to deny who he is to me.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Because I find it interesting that you had watched like TBN prior to that, because in an attempt to, I guess, make fun of it, like you said, because
no, that's a fact. That's a fact. I mean, we would be stoned usually and turn and just happen to see it, and then we would make fun of that stuff. So you're not exaggerating.
Right. And you would try, and you did that, but I think the Lord was still speaking to you in the midst of that, of almost like that almost sounded like a foreshadowing to me of what you would later experience. He was almost like showing you what was going to happen, but whether you were actually going to see it and believe it for yourself was up to you. And it was up to you to be like, what am I going to do with this information?
Yeah.
It's the irony of it, of just like, I had no idea, but it was right in front of my face the entire time. It's so funny the way that God works like that.
It is. I want to add something to that, because you just made me think of something, because there was a lot going on at the same time during again, I was 31 years old when this experience happened. There was a lot that was going on in my life around that. And one of those was, I'd mentioned earlier that, I was pretty heavy into abusing drugs and alcohol and those kinds of things. And when I was 30, this was just prior to, like, within just I would say probably a few months of me deciding I was going to go to this church service. I had done meth one last time, and I did it that night, and I did it with my ex-wife at that time. And the next morning, and really only the listeners out there who have lived that kind of a lifestyle are going to don't understand what I'm talking about, but I'm going to try and make it short and clear. It's not like you ever felt great the next morning after doing a bunch of really heavy drugs such as meth and other things like it, right? So I never felt good ever. But that particular morning when I got up the next day, it was different. And at that time, I just made this decision and I said to myself, this is not the kind of lifestyle I want. This is not probably the most important statement to myself. This is not who I want to be. I'm done.
Yeah.
And I was done. I didn't go through, and by the way, I'm going to be very careful with this because I coach and I've counseled a lot of people over the years, including in this area of addiction and stuff like that. You do whatever it takes, whatever he leads you to get free from that. So right. I am all about, if it's therapy, if it's going to a rehab, whatever tool is necessary, I'm 100% behind it. But all I can do is share my story. And my story is just simply, I woke up the next day, decided I didn't want to be that person. And I said, I'm never going to do it again. And I never did it again. And it was over. Now, to your point, the reason why I just shared that part of it, and I may not be able to prove this one, for some people's satisfaction, but I really think, like what you said, is I think God was already working in me even before I showed up to church that day, because I know too much about the power of that addiction to think it would be so egotistical of me to think that I'm just so much stronger than everybody else. And on just sheer willpower, I just said, I'm done. I don't think that's what happened. I think he was already working in my life. And then when I had that experience, that was kind of the catalyst to me fully surrendering to what that would look like. And then, and then everything else just kind of unfolded. And it's been an amazing journey.
Yeah. I mean, we can't ever do it on our own strength. We can't. For anybody who has ever dealt with any form of addiction, like, you can't do it on your own strength. Like, it's impossible, because the enemy will come to you when you're all alone and tempt you with certain ideas, give you certain ideas. Oh, do this, look at this, whatever. If you don't have that circle or the community you have, and you're all by yourself, it is so much easier to fall into that temptation and to just give in than to resist it. I mean, you're not thinking about the scripture that you've memorized or whatever, of the resources and the weapons that God's given you. You're not always thinking about that when you're all alone and you're feeling depressed. You're just like, oh, I don't know. No, you're just like, all right, well, I mean, let's just see what happens. I mean, that's yeah.
Well, for me, I think, again, you're saying a lot of things that are making me think. So we could go in a bunch of directions, but whether you're talking about addiction to a substance, an addiction, it could be addiction to sex. I mean, it could be addiction to making money. It could be addiction to a lot of things. But I sincerely believe the reason why it's true what you said about you cannot do it on your own is because there's only one that can speak to your true identity and who you were created to be. There's only one that can lead you into making the decisions that will allow you to experience the best of life that he's intended for you, to maximize the gifts and the talents that are inside of you. And that's the Lord Jesus Christ. And he's the only one that can speak to that identity. And so that's one of the things I just very recently sat down with a young man that is almost killed himself a couple of times, and pretty heavy drug addiction. And we had this discussion, and again, from experience, both personal for me, for myself, and then I don't even know, hundreds of people probably over the years that I've talked to and have helped in some form or fashion, just kind of coached them through some things. You need the voice of God to speak to the true identity of who you really are. And so if you try to find that on your own, what's going to happen is you're going to be a counterfeit, or at best, you're going to mirror something else you see in someone else that you somehow think is more successful than you. And once again, it's really just a counterfeit because you're not being true to who you are. You're trying to be someone else.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So kind of to circle back to my original question, after that spiritual encounter that you had,
Mm-hmm.
what was that? What did that road look like from that moment to segueing into like becoming a consistent and faithful Christian,
Mm-hmm.
and then what made you want to step into ministry?
Yeah, that's a great question because like you mentioned very early on in this, even that is different for everybody. I did not have this like immediate clear cut. Oh, I know exactly now what I'm supposed to do, and I know exactly what ministry looks like for me. It just wasn't that way for me. I recognize one thing. I'm going to give myself just a tiny, tiny bit of credit for making this one decision. And then the rest, I've really just got to give credit to the Lord. And that was just simply, I knew that there was a ton of stuff I did not know.
Mm.
I didn't know what those things were, but I
Yeah.
was keenly aware that there was a lot I didn't know. So initially for me, as I told everybody earlier, we're talking 31 years and not really a church guy at all. And then I started going, this particular church that I went to at that time, this is going off of memory, so it's been a minute, but I want to say it was probably close to 5 days a week. They had something going on pretty much every night, and certainly on Sundays, and even a Saturday night service back in those days. So the first thing I did was I just immersed myself in that. I went to every service I could go to. I went to every special event I could go to. I just couldn't get enough. I was so curious and hungry to learn and to know more about God and to be known by God. And so, that first roughly year was mostly that. Now, that said, because you asked a two-part question there, as I began to watch transformation take place. And what I mean by transformation is I didn't know everybody in the church, obviously, because it was a pretty large church. But in those days, I saw literally people that came in wheelchairs. I'll never forget this one. And he wasn't just in a wheelchair. He was super frail. And he just looked like he was on the edge of death. He just didn't look good at all. And at some point during that service, God healed him. And he got up and he grabbed a hold of his own chair and he literally started pushing it. And I mean, in like a jog. He wasn't just barely pushing it. He was running around the altar, thanking God for that. Well, that's hard to witness and it not have an impact on you, right? So there was that. And I saw lots of other things. And I saw and heard stories. You said earlier, testimonies are so important, because you need to know that you're not the only one, and that what God's willing to do for someone else, He's willing to do for you, even though it will look a little different. But He's there for you and loves you as much as anybody else on the planet. So I saw a lot of that. So what did come out of that is I knew I wanted to be in some form of ministry where I could help people grab a hold of that. And I could help see people get healed, whether that was, praying with people and I did feel like, I'm not trying to downplay my own abilities. Even in that stage of my life, I was doing speaking in another setting, not in a church setting, but in a business setting. And it's actually, my gosh, it's so funny because I haven't even thought about this and I don't even know how long, probably 10, 20 years. Even when I was in that business and I would get done speaking, I remember, and I can see the faces of two people right now in particular that would come up to me and they're like, man, when are you ever going to be out of church? When are you ever going to be? And mind you, when they were saying this, I was not a believer yet. Let that sink in. But they're like, man, if you ever have a church, I want to be there. I want to hear you speak. Right. So I knew I had a gift of communication, right? So but I didn't know exactly what that would look like, Jonathan. So it wasn't clear. It's not like I was saying, okay, well, I can speak, so I want to do what that guy's doing on stage. It sincerely wasn't like that. I just felt like God's given me that ability. I'm sure at some point that'll come into play. I want to pray for people. And then you're bringing up a lot of old memories here. The very first time that I volunteered for a ministry, where I actually took my first step into, okay, I think maybe I know what this could look like, right? And that was the prayer team, because I really there was just something about helping someone hear from God and seeing it touch their life. Because to me, that's what I witnessed when I watched prayer happening. And when I say prayer, for those in the audience who I don't even know what he's talking about, because prayer could be a pretty broad thing, right? In this case, I'm talking about very specifically in the context of a church service, where at the church I was going to at that time, afterwards, they would ask people if they wanted to come forward and have someone pray with them. And a lot of times when that happens, it's because someone feels like they don't necessarily know how to talk to God or how to ask God something. And so you have the massive honor of being the person to help them connect to that, right? So that's what I witnessed. So the very first one was, they had advertised, I don't remember if it was in a video or whatever, but they were looking for prayer team members. So I thought, oh shoot, there you go. That's what I can do. And so I applied, and I got interviewed, and I got shut down. I got turned down. And here's the funny thing, and this is for somebody. Somebody's going to listen to this. I'm telling you, somebody's going to listen to this, and it's going to be an aha moment, because the reason why they said no, and it happened to be the senior pastor's wife, she happened to be the one over the prayer ministry, is by that time, in this interview, you've heard me mention that I had an ex-wife. So we had gotten divorced several months after I gave my life to God. In the simplest terms, I was a broken man. She was a broken woman. The character of our marriage was just a complete train wreck. So there was a lot of reasons why it wasn't working very well. But when I voiced that I knew I wanted to give my life to God and to be in ministry of some kind, that was just not a life she signed up for. So she had divorced me. Okay. And I let it happen. I signed the divorce papers. So I was just barely coming out of that, like within a month or two. I had just gotten divorced. And so she was so gentle and so kind. And what she said to me was, and it wasn't about that because I was divorced, I was unworthy of anything. Let's be very clear for anybody out there. I don't want you to take away the wrong thing of where I'm going with this. But what she said to me is you've got some healing to do. Mm-hmm. And these were her exact words. She goes, I really feel like right now, this is a season, and he'll show you how long it is, where God's going to do a deep work in you and heal you. And then you're going to be ready for what he's calling you to. So right now, I think you just need to sit and take it all in and do what you're doing. And, if I'm being, honest about, which hopefully I always am, it hurt for a second. It really did. When she first said no, I'm like, whoa, because even though I wasn't a church person, I was thinking, wow, I didn't know you could not get hired.
Right.
But as she spoke to me and she explained it the way I just explained. Okay, my thing went out for a second. So at that point, again, your question to me was, how did I know, or how did I end up in ministry? It started with a no. It started with prioritizing my intimacy with God. That's the bottom line. So then we can fast forward about a year later. I had been praying and getting some counsel from one of the pastors at that church. I had really felt really strongly that God was leading me to move from California, which I'd lived in my whole life at that point, to Dallas, Texas. And through a series of, Lord giving me certain scriptures and just some confirmation of some of the conversations I had, I decided to do that. And I love this part because it's another opportunity for me to just talk about the goodness of God and the faithfulness of God.
Yeah.
I'm a new believer, only been with him for a year. And in a time of prayer, he made me 3 promises. And what he told me was, I'm going to launch you into your ministry. So we're almost there. I'm going to bring you a mentor. We all need somebody that's further along than we are to help us, right? So I'm going to bring you a mentor. And then he told me also he was going to bring me the bride of my youth. Now, I know that sounds weird to a lot of people that I would use that phrase, and it was just as weird to me when I heard him say it, because that's exactly how I heard God speak it to me, the bride of your youth. I did not know at that time that that's actually in the bride of your youth. So when I read that, I'm like, wow. So I end up in Dallas, and then I would say, I don't know, maybe 6 months after I had joined a church, I got an opportunity to start a small group for young adult men. So they were basically 19 to 29. And so that's where I started in ministry. I started as a small group leader. I'm being very candid with you, Jonathan. I didn't even want to do it. The pastor at the time, by then, and I should point out, by then, I had developed my speaking gift. I really felt like I knew I'd be speaking. I just didn't know what that would look like. I didn't even know necessarily that I was going to be a quote unquote pastor. I just saw myself, like literally, like I'm thinking, well, I want to ask the question, actually, if you don't mind, before you got into the creative side of some of the stuff that you're doing through, whether it's television or movies and this podcast, stuff like that, did you see, like in your own imagination, see yourself doing it?
No, but this is, at least when it comes to like live streaming, this is something that I've always wanted to do, at least since I was in middle school. Like, I think the Lord had planted those seeds in me since I was anywhere from 11 to 13.
Okay. Yeah. So for me, I saw myself literally, and it's kind of how it works for me anyway. A lot of ideas that I get, or even when I speak now, some of the topics, some of the messages I speak on and stuff like that, there's a lot of times where I actually see it already happening, like it's a movie in my head. And that's just part of my creative process. So when he had asked me to do it, the small group thing, I'm like, no, I don't think that's it. But to those of you out there who probably will get asked to do something that doesn't make sense to you at some point, if you're going to walk with God very long, it didn't take long at all. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was the best decision. And then ultimately, I came to a place where I really felt like, okay, I think I have a clear picture of what this looks like. I also went to work for another ministry. So I was attending a church, volunteering, and then I also was employed at a ministry that put on events all over the world and did big, they called them, crusades or conferences or whatever at that time. I was doing those too. So I was learning a lot of things that go into how you build a service, how you worship, how you hear the Lord. I mean, there was so many things happening that were kind of forming where I would eventually go, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. You actually said something that made me think. When you had said you had seen people get healed, obviously in my story, that is something that I've actually always struggled with. Seeing people who have, been able to play sports. I've always loved football. My dad is a New York Giants fan. He got me on that. I mean, as young as
brainwashed you. It should have been the Niners. It should have been the Niners. We all know it, but that's okay. You can keep going.
I don't know how that would have worked. We're from New York.
Probably not too well in New York. You might have gotten stoned or thrown out of the state.
Probably, yeah. But yeah, in middle school, I mean, walking around with an orthotic on my leg I just felt so ostracized. I hated it. I mean, I think that was the first time that I'd ever experienced any form of depression that was that I didn't even know what that was. I just knew that I felt so alone. And I did have one close friend that he was there for a season of my life, and I'm glad that he was there because he really helped me through a lot of those dark times, I guess. But um, in middle school, I think it was the eighth grade. I had one friend who was doing like an 11 on no, it was like an 8-on-8 football, and I remember. So it wasn't like full on football. I think it was like flag football. I think, and I had played sports in um, and this is the irony of this. I had played sports in a league called Miracle League. For anybody that doesn't know that, this is a sports league. I don't really know if they still do it anymore because I drive by the old courts all the time. But this is a league for children who are disabled. They're in wheelchairs. They have like cerebral palsy. Um, they have orthotics like myself, and
Yeah.
the first time I ever played was baseball, and it was I remember the coach. First time I ever met him, and first time I ever stepped on a diamond. Um, he asked me, "Are you do you want to play on a tee or do you want to just they'll toss it?" And I'm like, I didn't even know what that meant because I never played baseball before, and I had like complete motor control of my entire body, and he was completely shocked because when he looks at every other kid, they can't do that.
Mm.
I mean, these are people who have, they called it buddies. You would be accompanied by a teenager who's, in high school who would help you play these
Yeah.
sports. And I mean, I loved it. I loved it so much that I became like obsessed with it. And I remember playing football, I think two seasons. And I remember one time my coach actually told me to stand in the backfield because he wanted the other kids to have a chance. And it almost kind of hurt me because I was like, what? Like if you did a straight up comparison between my physical appearance and every other kid on that field, I was way better off than
Mhm.
everybody else. Like
Right.
my condition is so minor compared to what so many other of those kids have had to deal with throughout their lives. And it hurt me because I was just like, what do you mean? I came here to play. This is fun for me. My parents are paying for this. Like, I wanted to go out and play, but I, I mean, I saw all these kids, having a good time, and it was nice to see for sure. And then fast forward, um, it was in eighth grade. I had a friend playing 8-on-8, and he told me about it. I was just like, oh hey, let me do that. Like I tried everything to try to convince my parents to let me play it because I was just like, please, like I have a friend playing this. It's not like you don't know what this is, please. And I mean, it's the irony of this, but also I now see that it was God's timing.
Mm.
Of I went and saw my neurologist shortly after I thought I was this close of convincing my parents that um, that they were going to let me play. And I told my neurologist, please. I told her this because I thought she was going to be excited for me, and told me, yeah, definitely do it. And now I remember it wasn't flag football, it was tackle, which is
Mm.
the total reason
Okay.
as to why I got the answer that I did. I told her in expectation that she was going to be like, yes, you know, go ahead, just be careful. She told me straight up, point blank, don't do that. I'm like, what? She's like, I can't have you do that. You have made too much progress in your life. I mean, I was like 13 or 14. that if you were to get one concussion, you could go 20 steps back.
Mm. Yeah.
And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? So much so that I remember it so vividly. I mean, I remember the room and everything. I just could not contain myself. And I was bawling in that room because I was so hurt. And I'm just like, how could you say this to me? I thought I worked so hard to try to convince my parents, please just let me play. Because I felt like he was the two ends of the spectrum. I was too good for a league with kids with
Right.
special needs
Right.
and not good enough for normal kids. So I was trying to find this middle ground, and my doctor said I couldn't even do that. I was devastated.
Mm.
I'm just like, how could you do this to me, God? Like, I don't understand what I could have done to deserve this. And then,
Yeah.
fast forward, I realized that I've always had an interest in movies since like day one. I think the first ever movie that I like fell in love with was the very first Iron Man movie. I don't know what it was with that movie, but Robert Downey Jr. and that was when I think Marvel was it's at its peak, honestly, because it was the lack of budgeting that forced the directors and the producers to get really, really creative, and it showed. It really showed. I mean, you could say the same thing with the original Transformers. Like the budget compared to budgets nowadays,
Oh,
it
sure.
was so small, and they were forced to get creative with the CGI, with the actors, with the shooting locations. Like they had to because they had to make this budget by this deadline, and I just like slowly began to like fall in love with movies, and then in my junior year, after I like almost kind of like just kind of like come to terms with okay, all right, I guess God made me like this for some reason. Don't really know what it is. I'm not really interested in figuring out why because I was still kind of angry at God, but I came to a place of acceptance because I just felt like I had to. And then in my freshman year of college, literally like I start in August, that October, I go and see Oppenheimer. This is like the very first movie I'd ever seen by myself. Every other movie, I was with my parents and with my siblings. This is the very first movie I'd ever seen by myself. It was September, October time, so they were previewing a lot of movies for horror movies.
Mm.
And I don't like horror movies. I hate them.
I'm with you.
I've never been one to intentionally watch something to get scared. That's just dumb. I mean, there's a market for it, obviously, so people watch it,
Right.
but I'm just not one of those people. But those two trailers that will always stick out to me from moving forward. The first one was The Nun. There was The Nun 2, and the second one was The Exorcist.
Oh my, yeah.
And
The heavy one.
it was back to back. It was back to back. I got so scared that I wasn't even watching. I was just looking at my phone, like opening the weather app and at the calculator. And the best part was I didn't even have to watch. It was just the audio. It was just the audio. I mean, you can tell our entire story with just audio.
Sure. Yeah.
But what stood out to me was just how open they were at mocking God.
Mm.
And I'm like, time out. What are you talking about? You're mocking my God, the same God that saved me and has a plan and a purpose for every single one of these people in this auditorium, whether they see it or not. And to me, I'm just like, how dare you? But in that moment, after I watched the movie, because it was a 3-hour movie, I get in my car. I was still a little shaken up. And it was in that moment, before I left the parking lot, that God just told me in that right there, this is why you are called to this field. I was just like, what? I'm just like, what does that mean? And he's just like, in a world of darkness where they are openly, it's like they're not even hiding it anymore. They are
Sure.
openly
Yeah.
mocking the name of Jesus, and they do not care. And they're trying to hurt the name that saved me. That is precisely why I was called to this field, because people need to know and be reminded that there is still the light of Jesus in something as simple as TV and movies, something that we go through
Mhm.
day to day. And there's always that hidden message in everything that we watch, right? There's always that overarching theme. And it was that like completely changed my life.
Mm.
So sorry, I am rambling with that, but my question is, back in 4th grade, I remember I had this one teacher in Sunday school. I looked up to him because he was the one that did the leadership program at our old church,
Okay.
and he told me that he had a dream that he saw me running in a field, like full speed, without an orthotic.
Mm.
And I was 9 years old. I did not understand that at all. And I'm just like, what do I do with this information at 9 years old?
Right.
And I now understand it when I went to a youth conference. I think I was 18. The Lord told me, you may not see healing now being potentially here in this during my time here on earth, but I will receive it one day. So my question is,
Yeah.
all that to say, right? The people who are like me, who feel pretty much or have felt down and out and feeling hopeless as to why God is healing so many other people, but not me. What would you say to those people?
Yeah. Well, it's a big question, right? And if we're being, if we have integrity, then we're going to start the answer to that question with none of us can adequately answer that question for God, right? So I will make an attempt to answer your question, but I'm going to frame it that way because that's just at the end of the day the simple truth. But I'll tell you what I believe around it, if you allow me a moment to try and do that, and then by all means, if you feel like I'm ducking your question, then reel me back in. I don't think I'm going to, but let's give it a shot. I think there's some really hard things to experience in our humanity. And one of those is the limitations of our physical body, whatever that looks like, right? And so, in some cases, to your point earlier, even in telling your own story, some people have what we would characterize as perhaps even in our mind, like perfect bodies, right? And I don't mean like a scale of 1 to 10. I'm not talking about that per se, but they don't really have any physical challenges, right? So there's that. And then there's other people who have some physical challenges. And then there's other people who have just horrendous physical challenges. I think of Nick Vujicic, which I have a hard time saying his last name, but who if one of your listeners doesn't know who that is, he's someone who preaches the gospel and he doesn't have arms or legs, kind of hard to envision. So we know that in our humanity, and when you start talking about physical bodies, there's a pretty extreme spectrum of human experience, right? So within that, and this is the piece that I think can be hard for us to get to, is the physical side of our existence is the lowest level of existence. This isn't even going to last. If you believe the scriptures, if you believe and you have faith in Jesus and you believe what the scriptures tell us, this is a very temporary. And for those listeners, I'm sorry, I never even asked you, is this going to be video too?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay. That's not Jonathan's fault. That's my fault. I forgot to ask. So you guys can see what I'm doing. I need to know if I need to explain what I was doing. This earth suit, it's temporary. All it is right now is it's a casing that our spirit is currently entrapped in, right? And so the physical is the lowest level of experience. The highest level of our experience in our existence is our spirit. That's really good news when you're a believer, because that means we're all equal. The highest level that I can attain is to live out my potential spiritually, right? Because even if I have what most people would consider to be a healthy body, well, for how long? We don't know. We don't know. We can suddenly get cancer. We can get, hit by a car and not die, but lose limbs. I mean, there's just so many things that can in an instant change our physical ability and appearance, right? So now I think it's really important, because I am somebody who has full functions of everything. And for my age, I'm a fit person. So I want to speak to anybody out there that, has some physical challenges. I want you to hear my heart on this. I am in no way at all diminishing your experience, nor am I in any way trying to diminish the pain. And Jonathan, you've told your own story here of what you've gone through to learn how to cope with that. But you asked me, how do we deal with healing? And I don't know how else to answer it other than, even if I get healed on this side, it's very temporary, and it's the lowest level that I can achieve is a physical healing. The regeneration of my soul, my spiritual maturity, that's the only one that will actually translate to eternity, right? And so I can give you an example, because I've been on both sides of it myself. I've prayed for a lot of people over the last 30 years. I've seen many of them get healed right on the spot. I have seen people, their blind eyes open. I have seen, I remember, well, my own mother is a pretty crazy story. My mom was about, 75, I want to say, when we were visiting her one time, and she had suffered from, if your listeners don't know what macular degeneration is, basically it's an eye issue, and you'll see it or you'll recognize that someone has it because typically it looks like they have like a big splotch of milk over their eyeball. It's white. And so she was basically blind, and we prayed for her, and on the spot, God opened her eyes. So I've seen God move in that way, right? In my own physical body, 25 years ago, I popped something in my neck. Over the course of 9 months, I was in extreme pain. I had numbness and electricity, constant, just nonstop throbbing, electricity, the whole thing. Refused to go to a doctor. And we're actually staying on topic, Jonathan. Don't worry, I'm not taking the rabbit trail as much as it sounds like I'm about to. I didn't even go see a doctor for 9 months because I just was convinced that I was going to get physically healed, right? And it just wasn't happening. So I finally went to a neurosurgeon because that's where I was referred based on my symptoms. And ultimately they told me I had 2 discs out of my neck, 6 to 8 millimeters, which if you don't know, it's a lot. And they said, surgery is the only option, and it was going to be disc fusion surgery. So they were going to remove the discs and then use steel plates and fuse my spine. And so at that time, I was getting ready to go the next week to Hawaii on a ministry trip. So I said, okay, that's fine, but I'm not going to miss Hawaii. So I scheduled the surgery for the week after, I mean, I've been in pain for 9 months, so, I can handle another week when it's Hawaii. And all I can tell you is during that trip, at some point, and people have been praying for me for, the whole 9 months. I had people praying for me all the time. In the ministry I was in, as I mentioned just a moment ago, I was seeing people get healed from all kinds of stuff, but I wasn't getting it. And then I got on a plane, started flying. It's a 5-hour flight from Honolulu to LA. About 2.5 hours into it, I began to move my neck. Wow. Turned my neck, couldn't believe it. I was healed. Canceled the surgery. That was 25 years ago. Okay. So I did get the healing. Now I've had this other issue that hit me when I was about 19 years old for the first time. And now we think what it is just a really intense hiatal hernia that hits me at certain times. But it can be pretty debilitating. And, I've had it. It gives you extreme pain in your gut area, and it radiates all the way through your back. It will make your back hurt. And you'll have nonstop pain. You can't eat, you can't do anything. And I've had it go as long as several days, and sometimes, or more often than not, I should say, it's, maybe 3 to 12 hours, but it's very painful. Well, I've prayed for that to be healed many times. Is that harder for God to heal than a spine that's pretty damaged? I would say the answer is no, but I haven't received that healing yet. Still haven't. So where I'm going with that is just simply, I believe the scriptures are very clear about our part. And that is, our part is to know that Jesus died for that, and to know that he paid the price and bled out for the opportunity for us to be healed. And we should contend for it. This is what I believe. I believe we should contend for it. I'm still contending for it. But to your point, whether we experience it on this side of eternity or the other is not up to us. And it's really hard to adequately answer, why does God heal certain physical things seemingly right away on this side, and why do some things get delayed? I can't answer that. But I will go back to, again, I know this, that the greatest miracle is not a physical healing. The greatest miracle is the offer of relationship with God. The greatest miracle is the ability to be spiritually connected with our Creator, have a personal relationship with him, one that is going to go on for an eternity. And if you believe that promise, then you also know in the scriptures, there's also a promise of a new body that will know no one. We're all going to be on. See, right now we're all on an equal playing field spiritually.
Right.
We're all on an equal playing field in terms of what God can do with our soul. Bodies, not so much. But there is coming a day when we're all going to be given a new body, and it will no longer be corrupt and decline and have issues. So that's how I answer the question, Jonathan. And I recognize for some that's going to resonate, and for some, it's not, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, man, yeah, I remember a night more recently, and I think this is why other Christian filmmakers, I'm really thankful that I'm seeing a lot more of it nowadays. But one thing that changed my life and really changed my perspective on the way and why Jesus heals us is heals certain people, but not everybody, right? Is a scene from the Chosen series. And for anybody who has seen the show knows what I'm talking about. And who haven't, I challenge you to watch this. But there's a scene between little James and Jesus. And if I remember correctly, little James had scoliosis. And obviously back in biblical times, there was no real tangible no real medical help for him. And so he had to walk with a cane. And so he remembered he went up to Jesus and he said, because Jesus had just given a little spiel to the disciples and was about to walk away, and little James caught him. And he was just like, hey, I know you just said things about how he was This was right before he sent out the disciples 2 by 2. And he had said that we would have the ability to heal others. And he's just like, even me, I would have the ability to heal others. And he was in disbelief.
Yeah.
And he's just like, how would somebody like me, who has not even received healing, be able to heal others?
Right.
And what Jesus said, or sorry, the way that they wrote the scene will like always, I think this will always stand out to me, is Jesus said, it's always amazing to see a miracle done for others, right? When we see a miracle done, it is so beautiful because it helps others believe in Jesus, right? And come to Christ.
Mm-hmm.
But for those who haven't received healing, especially for someone like myself, at least as far as I know, maybe not on this side of eternity, how much more does Jesus entrust those people to go out and really 2 by 2 spread the gospel and show how even in the midst of our own physical disabilities, we still choose to praise Jesus and proclaim the word of Jesus in the midst of our pain, in the midst of our suffering, and to show people that if God is still prevalent in my life and he saved me and he trusted me, he's entrusting me with carrying the gospel and sharing his truths with all these people. If he can do it for me, then he can do it for you. And I just found that so beautiful because I was still struggling with, at the time, not necessarily like, God, when is this coming for me? Because I had come to a place of acceptance at that point, but still struggling with it. As I mean, it's life. Life sucks. I mean, still being like, okay, like when am I gonna really receive this? And what am I even worthy of? Being able to carry the gospel to others. Because people could be like, okay, why should I believe you if God hasn't healed you? Isn't it more important that in the midst of this, that I still go, well, yeah, but God is the one that saved me. And even in the midst of it, he's still the only constant in my life. I feel like that is way more important. And to anybody who may watch this, what's coming at the other side of eternity is so much more important than what we do here on earth. Obviously, what we do here on earth is very important, but don't get so hung up on your physical appearance, on your physical handicaps or mental handicaps or whatever. God is still entrusting you. If you know the word of God, you know the character of God, and you know that he works all things together for the good of those who love him. And for someone who is still struggling with that, and I'm still trying to do my part to be like, okay, yes, Jesus, he entrusted me with this, and I'm still hoping to see the fruits of my labor when I see him, the creator of the universe, face to face. So yeah, I don't know why that night that I was just looking on YouTube and that just popped up in my feed, and it changed my life because I was just in utter disbelief of the love that Jesus had for his son in the midst of his pain. And he's just like, how much more do you think I trust you than just a regular person or normal person that you wish that you were?
Well, I think, Jonathan, you're hitting on something here that's the most critical, and it's again, I think both of us are trying to be very careful here with anybody who is experiencing some sort of, physical, whether it's a disability or something that, has been a real great challenge for them. We're empathetic to that, but you're speaking to something that's bigger and higher. And what that is we were created to worship God. There's a whole bunch of folks out there right now that are listening to us. And I can just tell you statistically, because there's been plenty of surveys that have been done in and outside of the church. There's so many people. As a matter of fact, 75% right now, the studies out there show that millennials and Gen Z, 75% of them are searching for their purpose, right? What's my purpose? Well, let me help you. We all have one purpose, and that is to worship God. That's what we were created for. First and foremost, we were created to worship God. Now, what you're really asking is what am I supposed to do, right? That's when people ask, what's my purpose? They're like, what's the meaning of my existence? What am I supposed to do? But the reason why I'm bringing that up about worship is because to worship God sincerely, it has to come from a place where I'm worshiping him because of who he is, right, not because of what he does for me, right? Whatever form that takes. We were talking about just, the shape of our physical body a moment ago. Let me take it a step further, because our family story. So for your listeners, I have 3 boys. My oldest son, Gabriel, in 2019, he had become a pilot at 17 years old, just shy of his 18th birthday. He was flying his plane training and he crashed and he died. Well, there's a lot of scriptures that promise God's protection. We have served God faithfully to the best of our ability. Not perfectly, of course. I'm not, forget that. Far from perfect. But we have done our best to be faithful, right? And so, yet, we didn't get what we wanted, to say the least. Still to this day, the most painful experience I believe I'll ever have on this side of eternity. Now, that said, a couple years later, our middle son, Joel, who you also know, was in a car accident, and he had actually snuck out. So it was, all his doing. It was 1:00 in the morning, and he hit the median on one of the major highways here in North Dallas at 75 miles an hour. The car spun 5 times, got completely destroyed. And when I arrived at the scene, the police, the paramedics, everybody were blown away and said that there's no way he should be alive. He should be dead. And he literally crawled out of a car that was completely destroyed with one little nick that required a simple Band-Aid on his chest. Okay. Now, I'm grateful for that. I can't even put into words how grateful I am for that. That time I got what I wanted. So which is it? Right? In one circumstance, we didn't just not get what we wanted, which was for a long life for our oldest son. We lost him on this side for the rest of our lives. Still worship God. And the reason I do is because I worship him for who he is, not what he's done for me, not what he's given me. And so, I do recognize, again, from our human experience, that when we start talking about, physical challenges, that's a very hard thing. It's a very hard thing. But again, your spirit first, and your spirit and your soul is the only thing that is going to go on. And so, I think when you come to a place where you can accept that and recognize that it's really about worshiping him for who he is, there's something that happens, and it's not magic, but it is supernatural, where he gives you this ability. And to your point, you mentioned a minute ago, one of the most powerful scriptures there is that, he will turn what the enemy absolutely meant to destroy you. Okay. So your physical ailment, the enemy wanted to use that to destroy you. as he's trying to do with many others who are probably listening to this. There's others who are dealing with other things that the enemy is using to try. Maybe it's their mental health. Maybe it's, broken relationships. Maybe they've suffered sexual abuse or physical abuse. I mean, the list goes on, right? The suffering of humanity is pretty broad. But at the end of the day, he's bigger than all that. He's greater than all that. And if you will allow him, if you'll worship him and bring him into your life, there is a supernatural I'm going to use the word superpower. I know some are going to probably think that's corny, but there's this supernatural superpower that comes in to where you are able to overcome anything that is the lesser experience that you would have chosen, and you're able to do something beyond yourself to serve people, to help people. And so back to your story about, someone with a physical ailment still being empowered by God to pray and see other people get physically healed is pretty amazing. And I know a lot of people that fit that category, but I have one friend in particular. His name is Joel. He got a very rare disease hit him when he was 16. So his first 16 years were normal. And then at 16, he got hit. And so he has needed a kidney now. I think he's in his 40s now. So been doing dialysis 3 days a week for the last, almost 30 years. Has been on the edge of death and at different times, right? And yet this is a person who has prayed for countless people that have gotten healed. He's ministered and taught the gospel, and countless people have gotten saved. Why is he not physically healed yet? Don't know. But he's discovered the better thing. And it's better to worship God and be in relationship with him than to be in perfect health and completely without him.
Right. Yeah, that's so beautifully said. That kind of plays into the next section that I would like to talk about, which is for those of you who are maybe not aware of, at least in the Christian faith, this week has been Holy Week. And so on Sunday, we started with Palm Sunday, where Jesus entered into Bethlehem on a donkey, fulfilling the prophecy that he would do that. That prophecy was even foretold, thousands of years before he was even born. And so he was fulfilling that prophecy. And so that was kind of like the first step into Holy Week, which is, as of yesterday, which was Good Friday, that was the day where Jesus was betrayed by one of his disciples, where he was taken to the Roman Empire, where he was completely humiliated, beaten, and I listened to a message once of pretty much describing the graphicness of what Jesus endured. And I don't think I'll ever forget that. And then I watched Passion of the Christ.
Yeah.
And I don't think I ever understood, prior to watching that, I don't think I understood what my Savior had gone through.
Yeah, right.
And after watching it, it helped me visualize everything so much clearer. And so it was so beautiful to see that in the midst of him going through all that, being publicly humiliated, really beaten to a pulp. His intestines were showing, his ribs were showing.
Yeah.
And he has to carry a 200-pound cross up this massive hill. If that isn't really the greatest love story I don't know what is. For somebody who knew everything that was going to happen,
Mhm.
knew that his disciple was going to betray him, knew that everybody surrounding him would turn on him and run and flee. Even his closest disciples ran for their lives. I mean, if that wasn't orchestrated by God, like, I really don't know what is. Like, that is arguably the greatest story ever told. And the fact that in the midst of that, Jesus still died on the cross in the midst of our sins. The best part is that he already knew everything that we were ever going to do.
Mhm.
Ever.
Yep.
He from conception till very last breath, he knew everything that was going to happen while we were on this earth. And he knew how much we were going to deny him. And yet he still endured what he endured and died on the cross just so that we can have a relationship with him. Is so powerful. And so, to anybody who's listening and is really like questioning their faith, or even unsure of if this guy named Jesus is even real, I mean, I'm living proof. At 13 years old, I really didn't think I was going to make it. I was so incredibly depressed that I had really considered ending my own life. And I never acted on it or anything like that. It was really the enemy just like attacking me so much, of questioning my identity, why I was here on earth. If God can encounter somebody like me who didn't understand why I was created, what my purpose even was, if he can do it for me in the midst of all of my sin, then he can do it for you. He will meet you exactly where you're at. I mean, I've seen more often than not in my own life that he meets me when I'm in the trenches and when I'm like so alone than when I'm at the pinnacle and when things are going great, life is good, I'm seeing the hand of God. I've seen him work more when I have nothing going for me, when I feel so alone and I feel like God has abandoned me. That's when Jesus shows up. That's exactly when God put that video in my feed. When it was a night where I was alone and I was questioning who I was and really questioning if this career path was really for me. He showed this to me and I'm just like, okay, well, this is still it. So, my question is, what would you say to the unbelievers who are still questioning their faith, kind of like treading that line of, okay, I know he exists. I know that a lot of these Christians talk about him and that people go to this place called church. What would you say to those people they need that defining moment, or that moment of realization, or that aha moment that really shows them for themselves who God is? What would you say to those people?
Yeah, again, you're not softballing anything today. I think the first thing that comes to my mind is just simply when here's what I believe, and I believe the scriptures play this out as well. If you carefully study the scriptures, it says, if you seek him, he will be found. I 100% believe that anybody that is sincerely trying to discover, is God real? Does he really love me? Can I really have a relationship with him? Whatever those questions are, I have no doubt that they will find him. That said, I think all I can do is really answer that question through the lens of my own experience, because I don't have any other real, tangible way of answering that question. I can't answer it for someone else. I know there was a hole in my life. I know that I never felt worthy. I know there was an emptiness, and I didn't suffer from like deep depression or anything like that. It doesn't have to be that extreme. I know you did, and so you very masterfully explained kind of your journey through that and where you ended, with the Lord and how He brought you out of that. For me, it wasn't about depression, but it was definitely about a lack of purpose, a lack of connection, broken relationships left and right, all of those things. And I think when you quit looking for a religious answer, meaning church or synagogue or temple, whatever, I don't care what term you give it. When you quit looking for something like that, and you just simply ask God to reveal Himself to you, I just sincerely believe that He's going to do just that. And I do know firsthand, there's some crazy stories. I've got many friends that are missionaries and have built churches in Iran, for example, which is obviously in the news for a lot of reasons right now, and other parts of the Muslim world. And I know several that have personally witnessed people who Jesus, the man in white, appeared to them, sometimes in a dream, and other times literally, like just appeared and revealed Himself to them, and they got saved. That's pretty crazy. That's pretty amazing. Right. For other people, it's just going to be Him introducing, and most of the time God uses people, right? So you're going to end up in a conversation. You're going to end up in a situation where you're going to recognize someone who has a spiritual, genuine connection with God. And if you want that, you're going to take a step, and you don't have to take much of a step. That's the beautiful part.
Yeah.
It just takes not even a full step. You just need to barely move, and God's going to meet you right where you are. But I would propose to you, even with our own story, and this is where I don't mean to, hopefully this isn't getting too complicated of an answer. I apologize to anybody out there is like, what is he talking about now? But even, my story in the beginning, what I shared with you guys earlier, I know God was already working in me before I recognized it, right? There's no question in my mind that He was working on me already, and He was always there. You made a point, and this is something I think is important to say as we try to, unpack this question you asked. Even when you said a minute ago, those times when you have been most alone and dealing with stuff is when God has shown up. And I'm not saying this to correct what you said, because I think what you said is very accurate. But I think there's a deeper truth to that. And the deeper truth is, I really believe that the reason why it feels that way, and the reason why that experience happens to all of us, is because for that moment in time, we have turned to ourselves. Mm-hmm. Because He's there in the good times too.
Yeah.
He's not just there. He doesn't just show up. He's not the crisis management God, right? He's not the God paramedic. But I think what happens is when things are going really, really well, pretty easy to turn to ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. It's typically when things are really, really hard and tough that we tend to turn our full focus to Him. And so then it very, very much seems like that's when He's showing up, and He does show up. But the truth is, He's never left you. So that's really where I would want to go with anybody out there who's wondering, is He has, first of all, He knows exactly what you've gone through. The scriptures are very clear that he experienced every emotion. He knows exactly everything that anybody would ever encounter and painful experience that they would have. He knows every single sin that you have and ever will commit. He knows all of it, and He experienced it. And to your point, what we're getting ready to celebrate, the resurrection tomorrow, on Good Friday, He took it all on. And there was a moment in time on that cross when the sky went black and the earth literally shook. that he literally became you in your most sinful nature, took it upon him, all of it, took all of it. I want you to think about that for a minute. I mean, you can't comprehend that. No one can comprehend that. I know what it's felt like when I've been caught up in the depth of my own personal sin in my darkest hour. I know what that feels like. Now I want to challenge anybody listening to this. I want to challenge you to think about, you've experienced that. Now I want you to imagine that you willingly love every single person so much, even though they've mistreated you, rejected you, made fun of you, mocked you, you still were willing and did take on that experience that you felt yourself, then multiply that times every human being on the face of the planet. He had to feel all of that at one time.
Right.
And he screamed out, "Why have you forsaken me?" That's what he said to God, because that was the moment when he took on all of our sin. That's the greatest story ever told. Yeah. It's the deepest love you could ever even begin to imagine, even though we can barely even try. Yeah. But that's what he did for everybody listening to this. That's what he did, regardless of your response. And so, you know, in almost 30 years of ministry, Jonathan, most of the people that I encounter, it's not always exactly the same, but most of the people I encounter, their biggest challenge with accepting that is they don't feel worthy. That's really the biggest trip up that I've seen mostly, you know. And here's the truth. You're right. You are. And so am I. And so is Jonathan. And so is everybody else on the face of the planet. Nobody's worthy. But you've been made worthy because of the gift that he's offering you. And I know this. You accept that gift, and your life is going to be radically changed for the good. And it's not a magic pill. It's not this, you know, this event that happens, and then suddenly now every single part of your life is perfect, and now you're going to get rich, and now you're going to have nothing but the best relationships, and you're never going to be sick again. And, you know, it's not that. But you will now be connected to your true father, your real father, through Jesus. Yeah. And no matter what you face, that constant companion is always there. And he will always, and I'm going to turn it back to you with repeating something you said profound earlier. And that was, he truly will take everything that the enemy went to destroy you and turn it to good.
Yeah, that's so good. I Good Friday service yesterday, the last song, which I don't think I've ever heard before, the lyrics of one line that stood out to me is, "Friday is good because Sunday is coming."
Yeah.
I'd never heard that song before, and it was,
I don't think I had either. Yeah.
It was so beautifully said that I'm just like, right. I mean, I don't think people even realize like the gravity of, yes, he did endure everything that he did. But even in the midst of that, and him still being laid in the tomb, we still have confidence that 3 days later, he literally walks out of that tomb completely unscathed. I mean, like, if that...
And 500, right? And we need to add this real quick. Sorry, I apologize for interrupting you. For those of you who just don't know this, because you haven't had time yet to study the scriptures, there was over 500 witnesses of that as well. So for anybody that's wondering, well, how do we know that? Anybody that's willing to dig and look for the evidence, it is there. Sorry, Jonathan.
Yeah. I mean, if anybody's questioning their faith, the evidence is right there in the Bible. I mean, it's all right there. Yeah, I mean, it's... If you really... Yeah, please.
No, there's just something you made me think of, and I want to share this. And I'm going to share it quickly And I'm saying with intention out here, folks, we're not trying to take a rabbit trail here, but I heard something that I had never heard before. It was from a messianic rabbi. So for those listening, they're not quite sure what that means. First of all, let's be very clear. Jesus was and is Jewish. He's our Jewish savior. He's our Jewish king. So let's be very clear about that. Okay. Now, that said, a messianic rabbi or a messianic Jew is someone who is still 100% Jewish, but believes that Jesus is the promised Messiah and fulfilled the promise of God, of which Jonathan just led us into with the death and the resurrection of Jesus and giving his life for all that. What I learned recently that I thought was truly amazing is in the original Hebrew language in the Old Testament, when am I back?
Yep.
Okay, I think I just lost you for a second. What's amazing is what they believe the original language speaks to is that, and remember, there's another scripture a lot of people have heard of, that God knew you before you were formed in the womb, and he knew you before the foundation of this world. And there's even scriptures in the Bible that talk about Jesus was before the foundation of the world. Jesus existed long before he was ever birthed into a human body, as a baby in Bethlehem, right? And what they point to is in the original language, it points to that before God created, Jesus agreed to the terms, because God already knew that mankind was not going to be able to live up to the Ten Commandments, would not be able to live up to living 100% spiritual life, right? Where they were perfect as Jesus was. So God knew that. And in their mind, Jesus made an agreement that he would go to the cross before creation was ever spoken into existence.
Mm.
Now, that's a massive potential rabbit trail. We don't have time to go down that. But all I want to let sink in on that, because there's a lot of scriptures that we could use to make that point, is just simply, for those of you who are listening, that includes you. There is no exception. And he knew long ago that you wouldn't be able to get there on your own. And despite that, he loves you deeply and passionately. He has been pursuing you, whether you recognize it or not. And he's ready when you're ready to make that decision. But there is a timetable, right? That's the reality of it. We have to make that choice. And none of us know, how long we'll have an opportunity to make that choice. But Jesus has absolutely chosen you long before.
Yeah, that is so beautifully said. Yeah. Whew.
I'm still wrapping my mind around that. So I probably shouldn't have said that one, because now we're going to both be like,
right.
And I know we're running out of time here. So, but it's a beautiful thought that, and the scriptures back it up. He always wanted you. Listen, this is for somebody. He has always wanted you. He has always desired you, and he's inviting you today.
Yeah. He never leaves us nor forsakes us. Man. Yeah, that was for somebody. Yeah. Okay, so as we're closing this, one thing I like to ask most of my guests is, for the future generations, what is one thing that you want? What one message do you would like to impart to people of my generation, of your generation, but also the generations to come? What's just one thing you would like to impart to them?
That I would want to leave them with, as far as like a a wish for them or a piece of advice?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, we've been talking about the most obvious thing, and that is truly giving your life to the Lord. So we'll just assume that you already know. Feel pretty strongly about that.
Right.
I would say the other thing, um, and I have two boys. One's 21 now, or well, everybody knows my story. I have three, but one is heaven bound already. The other two are now 21 and 16. And what I want for them is I want them to refuse to live in fear. And I know that sounds like a really big thing, but one of the things that God will unleash in your life, because he already put it in you, is the courage to do whatever he's called you to do. And I've just lived long enough to where I've seen so many people that don't live out the full purpose of their life because they're afraid of something.
Yeah.
And so my greatest admonition is you can feel fear. That's okay. We all feel fear, but don't ever give into fear. Don't stop pursuing who God has called you to be and something that he has put on your heart out of fear. No one has ever regretted doing something great, or at least attempting to do something great, because they've had the courage to do it and they knew God was calling them to it. No one's ever regretted that. But there's studies that actually show the greatest regret are things that people did not step into and do. And the one reason why they didn't is because they were too afraid to try.
Right. That yeah, that really plays into everything that I'm doing right now. Yeah, because I don't know. I personally just got scared or frustrated with myself about not taking action, about always really just like remaining stagnant, not just about like my faith, but about like my career. Like when I really take a step back and try to figure out and try to see if there's somebody to blame, it really isn't outside of myself. I mean, there's nobody else. I can't blame my education, or lack of education. I can't blame my upbringing or anything like that, despite what happened or anything like that. It's literally just down to me, because when I've said this on previous episodes, that I cannot bring everybody that I've tried so hard to maintain relationships with. I can't bring those people with me when I'm face to face with God. It's just going to be me and him. And when I see him face to face, can I confidently say, or even on my deathbed, can I confidently say, I did everything here on earth that I was supposed to with zero regrets, living every day like it was my last, living completely and wholly unto the Lord? Like, I saw that in my own life through other people going through their entire lives, really like never living up to their purpose, just like you said. And I was surrounded by people, especially with the people I was working with, who were just content with where they were. And I'm like, I can't surround myself with these people. I mean, I wanted to, and I tried my best to be a good influence to them and whatever, but I just felt like there was just so much more that God had in store for me, that if I just stayed right there, those things would never happen. And so whatever that took, if that meant leaving my previous job place and really like kind of stepping into something new. I mean, the career field that I'm pursuing right now, this is like completely unheard of in my family and pretty much within the Indian community. Like, I know 5 people, if that are in the creative field, that are And when I mean creative field, I mean like we're talking photography and
Mhm.
videography for like weddings. That's like the max. When I mean like when me and my older sister were figuring out what we were trying to do for college, both of us were just like, okay, everybody in our family is in the medical field. We're not going to go into the medical field.
Right.
Older sister went to engineering. I decided to go way off the deep end, and I'm like, I'm going to make movies. Literally for somebody like me who is really like a pioneer in this area, for me, like my parents have helped me, but they only know so much. Their connections can only help me so much. So it's
Mhm.
really
Yeah.
up to me
Right.
to make those really big steps, ones that I'm gonna do completely scared. I don't really know what's gonna happen, but I'm still gonna trust the Lord, and that He's gonna continue ordering my steps. So
Yeah.
I've seen that so much in my own life, because I saw it in family members, like external family members, that when they were getting older, it made me think, I don't want to live my life and go through however many years I have on this earth
Mm.
and look back on it and be like, I should have done this. I should have done that.
Right.
It really hit me hard. And I'm just like, okay. And it really like kind of kickstarted everything that I'm doing right now, to be like, okay, I'm going to live every day really like it's my last, and trust that the Lord is going to guide my steps while I'm putting in the conscious effort to be a good steward of everything that God has entrusted to me. Because He's entrusted me with a lot of certain things. He's
Yeah,
entrusted
that's right.
everybody with certain things. But are we going to be a good steward of what God has entrusted to us is a completely different question.
Right. Yep.
So,
Yep.
yeah.
And whatever that is, right? It could be, being a great dad. It could be being a great mom. It could be, being the next or the first
Right.
director that, it could be any of those things, right? But to your point, and this is what I was trying to say earlier, is nobody ever regretted trying to live up to their potential. The only
Right.
thing people truly end up regretting is living really small and below who you were meant to be.
Right.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So as we uh, again bring this to a close, I was actually going to ask if you could actually pray us out,
Yeah.
because I really I've been fortunate enough to be able to do this for a month and a half, and really to see the analytics of this has been just so amazing, because I really thought that nobody was going to watch this, that it was just going to be one person, and that I was just going to do this for fun. But I have seen quite the opposite of that. And I know that if I continue to steward this, I definitely think that there's a real possibility in this, whatever that looks like. Because I don't know what the purpose of this is, outside of me wanting to have really great conversations with people, and the
Yeah.
fact that I can look back at my YouTube channel and see and look back at it and like, really, this is like my portfolio, and every episode is a different conversation that I'm having with somebody. I think that's really cool, because I have personal records of everything and everyone that I've had the honor to speak with, and how each individual person has had a different story. So I think that's really cool. So I want to thank you for being a guest on this episode. And I'd love it if you could just pray us out.
Yeah. I'd be honored to. Before that, let me just say, I love what you're doing. And I think one of the reasons why I don't think it'll be any surprise that it does more than you could have ever imagined is, again, you're sincere in wanting to have real conversations, and you're sincere in wanting to make a connection with people. And that is one thing that anyone who's done any research in the area of human behavior in this last 5 years, even in particular, is our world is desperate for real connection and
Right.
real conversations and real answers. And that's what you're providing. You're providing it through this podcast with the wisdom and some of the experiences that you've had, and you're providing it from those who you have invited on to the show to be with you. And so I think God's going to continue to multiply that. And it's a good thing. It's a good thing that you're doing, because this world needs some meaningful connection
Right.
that leads to a healthy, fruitful life. So,
Right.
so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pray us out on that. Father, I thank you. I thank you for Jonathan. I thank you for Beyond the Cut, this podcast. It's your work. He has put his hands to it. You have used his creative genius, his creative nature that you've placed inside of him to make this thing come about. But Lord, we also know you're the only one that can bring the right people to it, that can, forge these connections and these relationships that come out of it. And so I bless it right now. And I just bless those who are listening. If you're a believer right now and you already know Jesus, I pray to Jonathan's words that he just spoke, that you would not give in to any fear in any part of your life, that you would constantly just give all of your fear to Jesus and allow him to lead you into courage, allow him to lead you into doing everything that he has called you to do with excellence to the best of your ability, and to let those results come about because of your faithfulness, and that you just won't shrink back. Don't live a small life. And for those who don't know Jesus yet, I just encourage you, ask him to reveal himself to you. Maybe you borrow a Bible, or you get a Bible and you start reading the Word of God for yourself and just see this and challenge him. God doesn't mind being challenged. I pray that you would challenge him and say, God, I'm going to read this, and if you're real, speak to me. And I believe he will. Maybe you're going to have courage tomorrow. It's Easter Sunday. There's going to be probably millions of people that typically do not go to church go. And they're going to go for a lot of different reasons. Maybe tomorrow you go because you want to see if this God is real, and you want to see if he's willing to connect with you. And I believe that if you do that with a pure heart, that's exactly what he's going to do with you. And so I thank you for that. I thank you for every individual that's going to be listening to this, that they would have a significant life, that they would lead a life full of peace and joy. And even through the pain and the challenges that life does bring, that they would never waver, that they would stay strong, that they would have an ongoing transformational relationship with Jesus, and that the result would be you have a desire to serve others and to bring a positive change to this world. And in that, we say it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it as well. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you. So I always like to send off my viewers with the blessing from Numbers 6:24 through 26. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. And may the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate you guys. Please like and subscribe. I really appreciate all the support. For those of you that don't know, I just surpassed almost 30,000 views from the past month and a half. I mean, awesome. That is I'm shocked, and I just want to thank you guys. Thank you for your support. I really appreciate that. Definitely subscribe for more daily content, and have a blessed weekend and enjoy Resurrection Sunday.